Hey, everybody.
By the way, this is part of the old coffee chats that I missed. Just a little bit of banter and getting to kind of chit chat and have a little dialogue while we met. And by the way, I got a fresh cup of coffee too, Mike. So this is a real coffee chat.
Yeah, very well. Good to go.
1:30 in the afternoon, a fresh cup of coffee. Wow.
Good.
Yes. Well, I got some connections over at Cappuccino Corner in the Public Services building. So,
Mark, when we meet, Mark usually orders a fancy dessert coffee. That's kind of like a milkshake.
Yeah.
And like a bunch of food. So that's the thing I miss most is like having these meetings, and I'm just like where we usually go: South Store Cafe, Long Bottom,
Right,
Insomnia, all the places I had like what I order, and so I miss being able to chow down. And say it's for work. It's like I have to. These 2,000 calories are just part of the job.
Casey, I love that back. Is that a little playground back there? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a project. It's a refurbished an old playground, and I put one of those kind of water quality tunnels.
Yeah.
Big plastic things in it.
Yes.
And we back to green space, so we're lucky for that.
It looks fabulous. I'm going to come over and swing.
Come on by.
My daughter and I built one for my granddaughter earlier, late spring actually, and it was almost 2 weeks start to finish. It was one of these massive kits that shows up on 6 pallets. Yeah. Oh yeah. And we got it done, and we were pretty pleased with ourselves. But yeah, it's just absolutely gorgeous amenity when you get them all done. It adds value to your house. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. All right. Looks like we have live stream is running. Beth, do you want to do the welcome, and then I'll go ahead and kick us off?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Thank you everyone for being here today. This is our second of 2 fall superintendent coffee chats. And although we're sad that we can't see people in person, we're happy to be able to provide this virtual format. And hopefully we'll be able to cover more topics than we might otherwise be able to, just simply for the fact that we have so many administrators and school board members on this meeting with us today, and we'll get through just as many topics as we can. So Superintendent Scott, would you like to get us going?
Absolutely. So regardless of where I run into people in the community, or whether I get emails, or whether they're calls, the number one question that we are asked is, so when are we going to be back in person? That happens over and over again, and that is the number one question that we get. And while that is unknown at this time, share with you the process that we're using as we move forward. There's been a lot of talk in the news lately about the potential for the metrics used to determine when in-person learning is accessible for students. There's been a lot of talk about those metrics being changed. And we do believe that's going to happen probably in the next couple of weeks. We'll receive additional guidance on that. Regardless of what that guidance says, though, there's a process that we have engaged in that will allow us to open in as smooth a manner as possible, and while taking into account all of the safety needs that we need to. So we just share that with you a little bit. The first stage that we're all in currently right now, of course, is comprehensive distance learning. And we know in distance learning that students are not physically coming into the school. And that's really the first stage that we find ourselves in now. Interestingly enough, when we all in March, spring of last year in March, we basically were in school one day and we were out the next. And our ability to make that transition with a longer runway was really non-existent. We started distance learning immediately, and we thought originally, if you'll remember that far back, we thought that it was probably going to be a 2-week phase that we were in. That we believed that if we could just be out for 14 days, the virus would run its course, and we would be able to return in person. That obviously did not happen, and we find ourselves still in distance learning and driven by health metrics that exist throughout the county. When the metrics allow us to do so, we would come back. We would come back in a hybrid model. There is a step in between there that we're going to be exploring during Q2, and that's where we increase the amount of limited in-person instruction that we have available for small groups of students. That's something that we're going to be starting in stage 2, and that's going to align with Q2 for us. And it's really for those students who have not been able to access the instruction in the way that we would like them to, and that is determined through an assessment process. And it is likely going to contain mainly students that are on individual education plans and who need that additional assistance. That will start in Q2. The next phase then is stage 3, and that's where we have students from pre-kindergarten to 3rd grade. They would be allowed to return in person. 4th grade through 12th grade would be, they would remain in distance learning. Now, this plan is all based on the current metrics that are in place right now. If those metrics change, then we will also have some adjustments to the stages that I'm describing as well. But in that model where we have hybrid learning available to us, it would be grades kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade would attend daily, Monday through Friday, and 3rd grade students would be in a hybrid model for 2 days a week. Pre-K students would also be in that hybrid model for 2 days a week. And then, of course, we would need to maintain 4th grade through 12th grade in the distance learning program that we all are in right now. Following that would be stage 4, where we have grades 4-12 join us for in-person or in a hybrid model for a couple days a week, 2 days on-site, and then the other time in distance learning. We would also have the opportunity for any of our students, any of our families who would like to stay in distance learning. If they feel like that's the best choice for them, then we will have that available as well. So there would be the option to return in a hybrid model in person, and there would also be an option to remain in distance learning. And then stage 5, of course, is the traditional delivery model that we're all used to and that we are looking forward to. If you were to look at all of those stages, when we start seeing that the metrics are changing to a point where we can start thinking of transitioning back to a hybrid model or some type of in-person instruction with our K through 3rd graders, then that's probably a 5-week period that we're looking at. We would need to maintain 3 weeks of the metrics in a positive situation. And then we would have 2 weeks that we would start to transition into that hybrid or into that in-person learning model. So you would see that coming at us, and we would start communicating on that when the metrics allow us to begin to see that we're able to make that transition. So when people ask me, hey, when are we going back? That's the answer I give them. And they, their eyes kind of glaze over. So my apologies for the long-winded answer, but it really is a complicated issue and an issue that we have to consider the state metrics and what is lined out at the state level through the Oregon Department of Education, the governor's office, as well as the Oregon Health Authority. So that's the question that I get most often. Any clarification from anyone else on the screen here that would like to add something to that?
Mike, you basically alluded to this, but there was a follow-up question that came in through the Google form today. And it says, Lake Oswego School Board recently approved 2 resolutions that were sent to the governor urging them to open with less restrictions, and wondering if HSD is pushing to get these metrics relaxed as well, or are we just waiting to hear what the governor and OHA decides?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we hear from our families, we really hear from both ends on this issue. We hear people tell us that, hey, it doesn't matter what the numbers are, I'm not comfortable sending my student back. We also hear the other side is, hey, I think it's safe now. Why aren't we in-person learning? And our answer thus far has been because the metrics won't allow us to do that. So are we pushing to have those metrics changed? I would say that all indicators are that those metrics are going to be addressed. And I think there will be new guidance coming out in the near future. So what that guidance looks like, I'm not certain. I would assume that the metrics are going to be part of that conversation. And I would assume that the guidelines around what any type of instruction is being provided, I assume there's going to be changes to those guidelines as well. So we are right now, we're going to be talking about this at our board meeting on Tuesday night, but I wouldn't say that we are pushing for the metrics to be changed. I would say that we are anxious to be back in person as soon as we possibly can, as soon as it's safe to do so. We continue to have conversations with our employee associations and to have those conversations so that we can make sure that we're addressing all of the safety concerns that we know are out there among staff members and community members. So I would say it's we're trying to hit that balance of not jumping the gun, but at the same time really anxious to have our kids back in person.
Thank you, Mike. Another question, actually kind of related questions that we hear a lot of recently are around the reopening of our elementary playgrounds and the status of high school athletics and activities. So maybe we could address the issue of elementary playgrounds first.
All right, I will kick us off and then I'll have Casey provide you with a little more detailed answer. We know that there are parks out there that have been reopened, and that of course spurs the question, why aren't schools reopened? In the guidelines that are provided by the state, there are some pretty specific criteria when it comes to being able to open our campuses up to the community. And there's a number of accountability measures in that guidance. And that's why we haven't been able to open thus far. Casey, do you want to provide some of the specifics on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. There's a handful of specific guidance that we as a school district don't feel like we're able to meet of the requirements. So an example would be in the line there, it says prohibit contact sports. We don't feel like without monitoring our fields or playgrounds that we could prohibit contact sports. It does state that students using or youth using playgrounds ensure that they're not being closer than 6 feet away. Without monitoring those areas, we're not able to meet those requirements. So there's another number of options that we're just not able to meet or feel comfortable opening with and not being able to meet those requirements for playgrounds and fields. One of the other things to think about too is a lot of our school properties are connected to large open spaces. So we just don't have staff available to enforce and monitor all of the guidance that we're given at this time.
Okay, would you like to, Casey, maybe continue and talk a little bit about the return of high school athletics and activities, what the plan is for that?
Yes. So Mike had mentioned a few minutes ago that our Q2, there's some pieces in Q2 that's hoping to reopen, one with some of the limited in-person instruction that may be going on. In conjunction with that, we are working on a plan right now to open some of our high school athletic and activity programs, having the ability to come on campus and do some limited activity on our outdoor fields in cohorts. So this would allow groups to potentially have a workout or some coordination as part of their team or group where a certain amount of time each week they'd be able to come in and work out again or have some interaction with their peers in cohorts. So our hope is that we're able to start that in Q2. We're putting our plans together right now and working with our high school athletic directors and principals. And we feel like we're on the track on the right path to make that happen here at the beginning of Q2.
Hey, Beth, while you're looking up the next question, I should have introduced, we have a number of staff members on the screen here, and they'll introduce themselves as they answer questions, but I do want to introduce our 3 board members that are on the screen here. We've got Jackie Spross, we've got Martin Grannon, and we've got Mark Watson. And as you know, they are voted in by the community, and they are elected officials that that have oversight of the school district. And we always appreciate their willingness to come and participate in these events. And we'll give them an opportunity a little later in this conversation if they want to weigh in or say anything. And then, of course, we'll defer to them if there's a question that comes their way. But I just did want you to know that we do have 3 board members on the screen, and we appreciate them being here.
Thank you, Mike. So in our previous coffee chat, we addressed the notion of support for students on IEPs. We actually had another question come in, and it states an issue in a bit of a different way. I thought I would just go ahead and read that and maybe have some of the folks from our student services team address that. This person writes, I'm the parent of a student in kindergarten in their neighborhood school. Our experience is that virtual kindergarten is not giving our child the connection with fellow students or teachers. I appreciate the efforts of my school's teachers, but much of this seems to be that children of my child's age are not developmentally prepared for online learning, and that it's hard to develop a connection with teachers and students that you haven't met. This isn't anybody's fault. However, I don't see how the IEP is being incorporated into their daily activities. What tactics are you using to encourage teachers and other staff to ensure students have the tools they need to succeed, especially when the current structure is developmentally challenging? Is there additional funding or encouragement for creative responses?
So, hi, I'm Wendy Ramos. I'm one of the directors of student services, and I serve the elementary schools. And some of the things that we do is that we make sure that our staff does have access to different professional development supports. But I do want to say that I know that each child is an individual and may need different supports based on their IEP. And I want to encourage you to reach out to your case manager at the school, because they are really going to be the key person to brainstorm the different things that you may need, we may need to put in place for that particular student. Relationship building obviously is something that is really important and key to make that connection. And over this format, it's difficult. And so there are different ways where we've had check-ins with students. We've done one-on-one small groups, different ways that we've brainstormed. So again, I would encourage you to reach out to that case or student. You can always call me as well. And I'm happy to work on that and figure out ways that we can do that. But we have done a lot to support our case managers, but there's always more that we can do. So love to talk more with you offline.
Okay. There's actually, to go back to our previous topic, there was a follow-up question, Casey, to the question about high school sports, athletics and activities. What about the ability for club sports and activities to restart?
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I forgot to introduce myself last time. So Casey Walatich, Chief Operations Officer. Yeah, we are looking at options right now for clubs and activities. Certainly, we're going to look to see what the demand is and what groups want to come and participate. So our athletic directors and coaches and advisors will be kind of going through that stuff next week to see how many different groups we have in mind. And then from there, our hope is that we're able to incorporate as many as we can and provide other spaces if needed. But right now, we're not quite sure, but it is in our mind about how to do that. And we're going to work to solve those issues as they arise.
Great, thank you. We've had a question about whether or not our high schools will be allowed to administer the SAT starting in December.
Sounds like a Dale Spitzer question to me.
Yeah. Yes. Hi, I'm Dale Spitzer. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Schools, and I directly supervise high schools. So we have been looking at our ability to facilitate those tests and working with the College Board, both ACT and SAT. And I think at this point, our stretch goal is to be able to offer both of those in January. So that's the planning that we're doing. We need to, of course, make sure that we have protocols in place for safety, people who are willing to come in and facilitate those tests on the weekends, appropriate PPE for the participants. So we are in initial conversations with those stakeholders to be able to do that in January.
Okay, and there are a couple of other high school specific questions. So Dale, these might be coming straight to you as well. There's a question, I'll state a couple of these and then let you answer. First is, why is Glencoe using a 5-point grading system? I thought all the high schools were to use the same grading system per board policy. Parents are having a hard time understanding the 5-point system. And the second question is, what is the plan for AP classes in quarters 2 and 4 to get all of the information needed to pass the AP exams when the test is 2 weeks into the 4th term? How do you make it equitable and fair?
Equitable and fair, yes. So I'll talk about the AP one first. So we have been having conversations with our AP teachers and doing some mapping of standards to make sure that our kids are as prepared as possible to take those AP exams. We know that students always are asked to take those AP exams before the end of the year, and that's kind of consistent. But our teachers who teach AP and IB over at Hill High, they are very familiar with the tests and are spending a lot of time making sure that students have what they need in order to be prepared. So it's a lot of mapping and partnering on behalf of the teachers to make sure that as much content as possible can be taught prior to those. In terms of the 5-point grading scale, I know that there has been a lot of conversations with the PLCs, professional learning communities of teachers, to create different ways to communicate to families and to students where they are in terms of their learning, especially in this hybrid situation where we're kind of looking at core standards. So I would encourage you to talk to your student's teacher or the principal or AP if you find the system confusing. I know that those marks were reflected in their syllabus and how those grades would be given. So if you feel like that's confusing, I encourage you to reach out to the individual teacher.
Okay, we have an HR related question. So I'm going to direct this to our Chief Human Resources Officer, Conaloo Williams. This question says, you don't have open buildings and not using many substitutes, also not running as many buses. Why are employees on work share?
That is an excellent question. Thank you, Beth. Conaloo Williams, Chief Human Resources Officer. In regards to that situation, we have a certain amount of work and we are using work share primarily for our transportation staff, because we have about 4 hours of time that our bus drivers are providing meals for our families and delivering those meals. That's one of the reasons. And then our transportation assistants, we are repurposing their work and they are supporting our schools and departments and facilities with projects. And so the main thing the reason we are using work share is to afford our staff continued insurance benefits. If they participate in work share, it allows them to maintain their insurance benefits. And then we also get to not have to lay off any of our staff. And that was one of our main purposes of participating in work share and affording our staff the opportunity to maintain their benefits during this time. Michelle Morrison, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would, Connor. Thank you, Michelle Morrison, Chief Financial Officer. So in addition to maintaining insurance benefits, medical benefits for our staff that are participating in work share, it also allows us to certify the amount of unemployment benefits that they are eligible to receive weekly, to kind of, it doesn't necessarily make them 100% whole, but it creates kind of a fast track for them to receive some unemployment benefits to round out their reduction in hours while maintaining their district contribution towards insurance.
The other piece that I would add to that is it also allows us to retain valuable staff members that already have relationships with students. So if you think about the amount of onboarding that is necessary for someone to really thrive in their job, that is pretty considerable. And so for us to be able to provide work for our staff members to some degree, and let's just use an example, there's a number of staff members that we're able to staff them at 60% of their typical hours, and 40% of that time they would be unemployment benefits for that. It does allow us to retain our staff members. So when we do get to go back in person, we have staff that already know our students and are invested in the system, are good at their jobs, able to come back. So while it helps the organization for sure because of the continuity that it provides, it also assists the staff member. There is a financial hit to the staff member using the process that we are, but it does allow them to maintain benefits and to still stay engaged in meaningful work in the district.
Okay, here's a question that was actually posed on Wednesday, but we didn't get to it during our session. So can we make available to Hillsboro School District summer school enrichment classes, grade school, as well as subject-based from middle and high school, especially offerings for 4-credit math? Oh, shoot. Just had another comment come in and push that one down. 4-credit math. Sorry. Oh, there we go. As opposed to credit recoveries only. This will allow HSD students to catch up with other school districts.
Beth, I can start with that, and then we'll have Dale provide more specifics. So we fully understand that during this time of distance learning, we're going to have to do some pretty extensive assessment of where students are when they return to in-person learning. We know that maybe there's some students that are going to be impacted, not maybe, there are going to be students that are impacted disproportionately when it comes to distance learning versus in-person learning. And so we have started to have those conversations, make those plans for what that catch-up system might look like. So I just want to acknowledge that we know that we're going to have to assess where our students are, and we're going to have to make some specific plans based on how those assessments fare as to what we do to move forward. So Dale, I'll let you share a little bit about some of the specific plans that have already been discussed.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about high school, and then I know both Olga and Travis are on that might talk about our migrant program as well. So we've had a couple schools in the past couple of years. I think one piloted it 2 years ago, really working with standards and which standards students hadn't missed or met yet in order to award original grade for courses. So I know that that's something that we're already working on, and with our options programs in our high schools, I know that some conversations that we're also having. We traditionally have offered summer school to students in the past, both for credit, but also to try to attempt to complete sections of courses that they need for graduation that they haven't had the opportunity to do so. So I know that that's something that we're talking about. We have to make sure that we can fund it, and we need to make sure that we have teachers that are willing to teach it, and we need to make sure that all of our students have access. So I think as we continue through this year and see what student needs are, and we do some more planning, I predict that we'll have some options for students into the summer.
And we have talked about, I don't know if everyone knows how successful we've been in the past few summers of getting hundreds of kids involved in summer programming, and a couple of the ways that we do that are through extended school year programming for students experiencing disabilities. We have migrant summer school for students who are emerging bilinguals and need support with language acquisition and dual language. We also run a number of science programs in the summer. And last summer, even with coronavirus restrictions, we were able to serve students in our ESY and our migrant summer schools, not as many as we have in the past, but a big part of our conversation about how to help students accelerate academically after this comprehensive distance learning experience have been to amplify those programs and to use resources that we have to expand summer opportunities for kids. So that's what I'd add to Dale's comments.
Thank you all for that. And Mike, I know you opened our meeting talking about what it would take for us to return to school. Can we specifically touch upon why Hillsboro School District has not made an announcement similar to Beaverton School District and Portland Public Schools about, for example, not having their older students return until after first semester?
Yeah, happy to do that. We've not made that announcement because our pledge to the community has been that we will let the metrics guide our decision on that. So we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where if the metrics start to change, if the public health situation starts to change in a positive way, that we've already made an announcement that said we would not be coming back to in-person instruction. And the other piece that goes with that is that I think over the last 7 months or so, we have all seen that the guidance from the state and the metrics that are outlined, or the statewide guidance to open schools again, we've seen that change over the last several months as well. So we wanted to maintain our options and make sure that we have the opportunity to be a little more nimble. And that's why we have not made that announcement or that decision yet. One of the things that sometimes I get asked is that we know that we have staff members, or we know that we have parents who have childcare decisions to make, and that for some of our parents, it would be easier to have this information sooner as opposed to later. I do foresee a time in the next, and I'm just going to ballpark it here, but in the next 4 to 5 weeks, where we could make a decision and confidently say, with the amount of time left in the first semester, it wouldn't make sense for us to reopen until that semester 2. But I also don't feel like we're there yet. I can tell you, I'm going to let a couple of our board members weigh in here as soon as I'm finished, but I can also confidently tell you that while concerned about the safety for staff and students coming back, there's always going to be that concern. There's also this desire to get kids back as quickly as possible, and we don't want to put that off if we don't need to. So we're always going to err on the side of safety. 100% we're going to do that. We don't want to put our students in an unsafe situation, or our staff in an unsafe situation. And even while I say that, we've learned more and more about the virus as the months and weeks have gone on. And so we want to be able to be nimble enough to react to that. Mark or Martin or Jackie, is there anything you'd like to add to that from a board perspective?
This is Jackie. I fully support our district in the decisions that we're making regarding waiting for the metrics. There's so much that goes into making that decision. We all want to see the kids get back into school. And I think that we are on the right path, and we're doing the right thing, which is exactly what we told our parents we would do. So I think it's important.
In the last 10 months, I've discovered that I really enjoy watching economists present PowerPoint slides. So had a great opportunity to do that yesterday. And, in a very nonpartisan way, one of the biggest takeaways was that, the pitting opening versus safety is not a very productive thing. It's when people feel safe, they will be going outside, and everybody's going to have their own threshold for that. The state's going to give us metrics on when we can be open, but you look at someplace like when the curve went up in Arizona and Florida, there was no mask mandate, there was no stay-at-home order, but they brought those numbers down because people started staying home. So we are pretty linked with how the communities handle the consequences of the pandemic. And while we may disagree with some of these numbers specifically, Oregon is one of the top 5 states in keeping this under control. So I would say, I endorse us following the metrics, and as the governor changes the metrics, and as OHA changes the metrics, and as ODE changes the metrics, we'd be nimble and be ready to capitalize on that. I think we need to get students back in classrooms as soon as we possibly can safely. And that's the qualifier, as soon as we can safely. Hopefully the experts who study these things and not just use common sense its qualifiers, will give us good guidance as to when we can make that happen safely.
And I would, I concur with all, and I would add that I think it's obvious to those on the call the aggressiveness and the vigor and the professionalism of Mike and all his administrators, and indeed all the employees of the Hillsboro School District to lean into this situation and make the best of it. And so I applaud them, and frankly, I also applaud the families. We all recognize this puts a tremendous burden on the homes and the families and the responsible adults in the lives of our students. It's a big burden on them, and we recognize that. But together, we can get through this and get through this appropriately and safely. I think all of us are very concerned about the health and well-being of our staff. They're a precious resource, and we just can't go into an in-person regime that results in attrition of our staff. We just can't do that. So we're, I think, prudently cautious in terms of making sure that we don't expose our precious resources, our staff resources, to a scenario that ultimately results in attrition. That'd be devastating. But we listened to Mike himself mentioned we kind of hear from both extremes, get back into school and I'm not coming back. So I think that this course, it was a decision we made early on to go with the metrics that were coming out statewide, and I think it served us very, very well. One thing I would also add is that there's opportunities in this regime that, and so find those things that really are a big win that we didn't see coming, and make as much of that as you possibly can. I know a number of parents have indicated to me they really like the improved access they have to their teachers via these digital means. And so I think that's an enduring takeaway that's probably going to stick is digitally teachers beaming into parents and adults in the family environment and having real conversations. So I think that's a win that's come out of this, and I'll take anyone we can get at this time. Thank you.
And I know y'all didn't come to watch this to listen to us talk. You came for superintendent talk, but I think what we're doing with the phased approach makes sense. So we're going to try to get students back in one-on-one after the beginning of next month, and as that goes well and as we learn more, we can start to expand the program. So it's really this phased approach will let us incrementally bring more and more students back as we learn how to do it safely.
Sorry, Beth, one more thing, and then
Yeah.
So, you just heard a number of board members reference the metrics. The other thing that I appreciate about the metrics is that it gives us a health standard that has been determined by health experts. As educators, we rely on the science of this situation and the expertise of the top health professionals in our state, and that has helped us tremendously. I also mentioned before that we continue to learn a lot about coronavirus and what is and what isn't true. And as we learn more, I think you'll see some changes to that. So we continue to be guided by the experts in the state in this field. So, all right. Sorry, Beth.
No, that's great. Actually, this is a great discussion, and it kind of tees up the next thing I was going to share with you that has come in from some of our patrons. And that's really just this sense of, what are we as parents supposed to be doing? What could we be doing? What should we be doing when it comes to, getting things moving? And I think, part of it is just the frustration of living in the unknown, which all of us feel that to various extents, but also wanting to know, is there something that I as a parent should be doing to, advocate one way or another at the state level? Or, I think parents are interested to know, do we have things that we are asking of them or that they should be doing? Do we have advice for them, or do they just wait and keep doing what they're doing? So not that there's a clear answer to that, but maybe just if anybody has something to share along those lines.
I can offer a few suggestions here. First of all, we rely on feedback like this, and we rely on feedback that goes to our principals and then comes to us. We do rely on that in order to provide feedback at the state level. So we're in regular conversations with the leadership at Oregon Department of Education, as well as the state of Oregon, as well as the Oregon Health Authority. So the feedback that we get from our community members, that is shared with them. I have always urged any community member that feels strongly about a topic that is where there is state guidance that's been issued to advocate for your position through the Oregon Department of Education. I think that's a great way to go. And we've heard over and over again when it comes to input that's being provided, yes, they value our input, but they really thrive on and look forward to parent input as well. So I would encourage you to do that. And I think that's the same with any elected official that we've heard over and over again that, yeah, it's great to talk to you, Mike. We also would love to hear from some of your families. So I think that would be a good way to go. Mark kind of works in this arena on a regular basis. So Mark, is there anything that you would want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just suggest when you're dealing with statewide issues, your representative and your state senators are great points of contact, as well as the governor's office. I mean, the governor's office is hearing from people every day, and the governor's office is essentially the organizing body that releases the standards set by the Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority. So the primary interface between those experts who are determining what the metrics are going to be is the governor's office. So as you have opinions and want to let people know, please continue to let us know. That I very much appreciate all the emails we've been getting. And Mike said we have everything from, oh my gosh, please don't open no matter what, and to how can we not be open full in-person classes already, and everything in between. So reach out to the governor's office, reach out to your state representative and to your state senators, because they very much do want to hear from you.
Great, thank you. So there have been a couple of questions around how our staff members are going to approach managing the situation when we do return to a hybrid model where they are both teaching students physically in class, but also continuing to maintain a comprehensive distance learning. And I know that's something we're currently working on, but is there anything we can share along those lines, some thoughts that we might have around how they balance that?
Dale, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my little button today. So we are going to first start with K3. We're going to start getting information from parents. I believe we're putting a survey out next week, because part of it is to see how many students we need to serve. If, for example, half of my class and half of my colleagues' class says that they're not going to be interested in coming back in person, then that allows me and my colleague to maybe think differently. Like maybe one of us takes on the CDL students that are maintaining distance learning, and the other one serves students who are coming in person. We have to kind of think through that creatively. So I think it's difficult for us to really know how we're going to tackle that until we see how many kids may or may not be coming back. We also might have entire classrooms of students that come back. So there are plans to do that conversation and look at that. K3 or K2, we've staffed smaller so that we can try to bring them in every day. So hopefully we will be able to serve even more kids in person and through small groups. We are expecting to find out through that survey what are the concerns of families, and if those are things that we can mitigate, or if those are things that they just have somebody in their family that are compromised and they're choosing not to come home or come to school and they're going to stay home. So I think gathering more information is our first step in planning for that.
Dale, did you mention when they can expect that survey?
Yeah, I believe we're going to send it out next week, and that will allow families. I think teachers are going to send it out so that the teachers can kind of monitor and be in the loop of, or the schools are going to send it out so they can be in the loop. And then we have conferences shortly after, so those families who don't complete the survey will be able to get that information when we conference with them.
And just as a parent, it helped me understand this with my own students, that when we go back to hybrid or in-person learning for our kids, we won't get rid of the learning platform with Google Classroom, Google Meets. Really what'll happen is that all of our students will still have Chromebooks. They'll be able to go to the school building and get be more collaborative with their classmates in different ways, get the support they need directly from the teacher. And then when they're in a distance learning environment, they'll still have those same tools that they have today. And so what we're hoping to do with our instructional leaders is make that experience as seamless as possible for kids and for teachers, not creating two universes, one that happens in person and one that happens with CD. It's really just expanding on what we're able to do with CDL when we bring kids into school, hopefully at least 2 days a week, and for the smaller students each day.
Thank you. Are we exploring any opportunities for outside gatherings of students for the purpose of education, and what would that entail?
That is something we've been talking about, and again, I can kick us off, and then if Dale has any additional details to add. But we know that when we come back in-person learning, that we're going to be continuing to look for some of the largest spaces in our schools so we can continue to have kids spread out. Again, it will depend a lot on what the guidance from the state is at that particular time, but we want to continue to have spaces where we can spread people out. So for some of our electives, and I'm just going to use some examples here, and I don't take this as how exactly it's going to go, but an example might be, what if we were able to have a large choir class, and what if they were to be outside under a covered area in the bleachers? That may allow us to spread kids out and to still have the option for choir, but do so in a safe manner. What if we were able to do that with band? So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about when it comes to outdoors. Now, of course, Q2, that occurs during November in Oregon. And so, so we need to explore exactly what that looks like depending on the time of year. Dale, anything you would want to add to that?
I just think it also gives us an opportunity once we start bringing sports back to see sort of how that works for kids, and then that might expand our thinking. I agree with Mike that there are some classes that we may be able to conduct outside under covered spaces, and then there's others that maybe not, but it gives us an opportunity through the piloting of sports to see what is working and what are the challenges in those sorts of settings.
Okay, great, thanks. Can we talk a little bit about current safety measures that are in place for staff and students that may be coming into our buildings?
I can kick us off on this, and then Casey can provide a little more detail. When it comes to, we do have some staff members that are coming in. We know that for some of our staff members, the classroom is the place where they're most comfortable teaching from. And then we, of course, have some staff assignments that those functions need to occur from a specific school or from a facility. So in order to accommodate that and to exercise as many safety precautions as possible, we make sure that as people come into the building that they are checking in. So there's a daily check-in and check-out. There's a questionnaire at each building regarding their health. There, of course, is a PPE available. There's masks and hand sanitizers and wipes at each entrance where staff can access the building. We've got signage posted around the building when it comes to the PPE I've mentioned. Also in regards to physical distancing, illness reporting, encouraging people to stay home if they're not feeling well. Of course, we require that masks be worn at all times while they're indoors, unless they're in an enclosed room by themselves. Maybe it's an office or a classroom. If they're in there by themselves, then they can remove the mask. We just, of course, ask that they put that back on if someone else enters the room. We've also got some changes to our heating and ventilation system that is taking place, and I'm going to not go into that and let Casey do that because he's much more well versed in that than I am. And then, of course, we ask people if they have been exposed to COVID or if there's been a positive test. We also ask that they communicate with their supervisor. But one of the things that I think is important for you to know is how all the airflow works, and I'll let Casey do that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. One of the keys to airflow ventilation that's been given out as guidance either from OHA, Oregon Health Authority, or even from the EPA and some of the national standards is really the ability to bring fresh air into our buildings and have our building systems circulate that air. If you think about how traditionally heating and cooling works, like in your home, it's temperature driven. So if you're hot, you turn on the air, and then when it meets a certain temperature, it shuts off. Well, what we've done is we've increased the percentage of outside air, so there's more outside air coming in, but we've also are having our fans run continuously during our occupied time. So not only are we working on the temperature part, but that air is constantly moving in and out of the buildings. We've done this also by turning our systems on earlier. So as opposed to, if somebody gets there at 8 in the morning, instead of turning it on a little bit before that, we're running those systems a couple hours before people arrive, a few hours after people leave to get that air pushed out of there. And then we're also doing what we call purges of air. So where during the evening at nighttime, we're pushing air from the outside inside to push all the air out. So constantly doing those things. Certainly over the summer, we have a really good maintenance schedule where our filters are regularly checked and changed. Also other maintenance items on our HVAC systems. And one of the big benefits from our 2017 bond program is buildings that had older HVAC systems. The majority of those have been upgraded and or replaced to make those systems function at a higher level. So those are the things we're doing for our HVAC systems.
Thank you, Mike and Casey. So Mike, our district has had a long history of partnership with the Hillsboro Police Department and Washington County Sheriff's Department to provide school resource officers for our schools. And a question is, does the Hillsboro School District still have SROs? Obviously, there was a lot of controversy around school resource officers in the spring, and different districts have taken different measures. So can you explain a little bit about where HSD stands?
Absolutely. Great question. Happy to have the opportunity to do that. As was stated there, we have a lot of communities across the nation that have been exploring this issue of school resource officers, and what does that relationship between education and law enforcement look like? We are no different in that. We want to make sure that as we started this discussion, we want to make sure that we had a very thorough process that led us to not a quick answer, but the right answer for the Hillsboro School District. So yes, we still do have school resource officers. We've still got an agreement in place with law enforcement. Because we're not in person right now, they have been reassigned to patrol at this point. So yes, we still have the partnership intact. Because we're not in person, they have been reassigned by the Hillsboro Police Department and Washington County Sheriff's Department. The process that we're currently engaged in is really taking two different tacks here. The first really, and in both of those roads, the first thing that we're doing is gathering information. We put out a survey to community members and students to gather some opinions and experiences regarding school resource officers in the building. We recently, over the last 2 weeks, have expanded that survey to all of our high school students, because the first time around it occurred during the summer. We just didn't get the participation that we had hoped for. So we have additional survey information that is actually being tallied right now, and we will share that with the board on Tuesday evening at the board meeting. Some of the processes that we're going through right now is the concerns that we have heard start to fall into a pattern. Whether we've heard those from families, or whether we've heard those from staff, or whether we've heard those from students, they start to fall into a pattern. And what we've done is we begin to identify where those patterns are, what those topics are, and then our goal is to put a document in place, a memorandum of understanding with the Hillsboro Police Department that addresses those patterns of concern. And it spells out what our reaction to that would be and what the response would be. So we're pursuing that memorandum of understanding, and that's one of the paths I was talking about. Because if we can reach agreement there, and we can reach an agreement to the point where our board and community and staff feel comfortable with that response, then we would continue with that school resource officer relationship with some changes taking place that are quantified and memorialized in that memorandum of understanding. The other path we're taking is just a broader discussion with leadership throughout Hillsboro. So in November, we're going to have the opportunity to have a joint meeting with the Hillsboro School Board, the elected officials from the school board, as well as the elected officials from the Hillsboro City Council. And that will be a broader discussion regarding the needs of our students and how we can meet those needs in a more comprehensive way. So make a long story short, we're in process in these considerations, and you can look for a decision. I would estimate now, and again, we don't want to shortcut the process whatsoever. So I would say that our board would be looking to make a decision probably December, potentially January, but we should have that decision made. And this is also a great opportunity for me to say that for the last 28 years, we have had a strong partnership with the city of Hillsboro as well as Washington County law enforcement. And they have been very generous in providing those school resource officers to our schools over those years. So we appreciate that. We also understand that over the years, there's been different iterations of what school resource officers are involved in, what that relationship looks like, and how they interact with students. And we feel like this is a very appropriate and necessary time to reevaluate that relationship and see what that looks like for the Hillsboro School District as we move forward. And our law enforcement partners have been very willing to engage in that conversation and to address the concerns that have been raised.
Thank you so much for that, Mike. Our time is drawing to a close, but I would love to ask our Chief Information Technology Officer, Jordan Beveridge, about how we are providing technology devices and access for our students, how that's going, and if people need support, where do they go?
Thanks, Beth. And Jordan, before you start, I also would like to, when Jordan finishes up, if we could give our board members one opportunity to have some wrap-up comments as well. We would go with Jackie and then Mark and then Martin. All right, thank you.
Yeah, so just a couple things as far as getting Chromebooks to students. Schools have done a great job of getting out Chromebooks to families and making sure every student that needs a device has one. So if there's still any needs out there, families should contact their school and we will make sure they get a device. As far as Wi-Fi, we have a number of opportunities. We've given out a little over 2,000 hotspots to families to use. Some families we've been able to provide more than one if there's multiple students in the family. So we're about to do another round of delivery of those devices as well. Again, to provide, in some cases, multiple hotspots for a family that has more than one. So if families are in need of that, make sure their schools know, and we'll be starting to deliver those out to schools late next week. And then we have our student family help desk that we've offered with both day and nighttime hours. So I have that up on the screen with the phone number and so forth. So please make use of that if any students or families are having any issues with their devices or connections.
I just want to take a minute to just thank our staff, our the superintendent, Mike, our cabinet. I don't know how we would be making it through this time without all of you thinking outside the box and being responsive. And I really appreciated all of the questions. They were very thoughtful and things that I'd been hearing from parents. So those questions were very spot on and very timely. So thank you, Beth, for doing that.
Yeah, thank you to all of our staff, and thanks to all the parents and community members who are watching and submitting questions. Yes, they were very representative of the kinds of things we are hearing. And when you ask, what can I do? I would suggest, of course, contacting the people who represent you, us, state representatives, senators, governors, But I would also just suggest, just continue to behave responsibly. Saw a map today. Like I said, the whole map was red or yellow. Oregon was the only green spot on it. So we are definitely doing better than the rest of the country in terms of keeping this under control. And it's not a political thing. It's a public health thing. Wear a mask and try to keep away from people that you don't hang out with on a regular basis. I will tell you that my normal Thanksgiving tradition generally involves 20 to 25 people. It's going to be 4 this year because that's how tightly we need to draw our circle to be safe. It's a regret that I have, but I would rather prioritize getting students back in classrooms than getting people back in bars. Thanks.
I'd like to thank Mike and his team for providing this venue for direct access. It's truly extraordinary. You don't have this kind of access to very many public agencies. This is an extraordinary thing from a local government standpoint. This is a best practice. Of our board chair, Erica Lopez, and all 7 elected volunteers that comprise the Hillsboro School District Board of Directors and our 3 student reps. I'd like to thank everybody for participating in this call and making it such a rich experience, not only for me, but for everyone on this call. I am very proud to be HSD.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you to our board members for attending. And really, I guess I would like to just end with I know, speaking to our families and to our staff members, I know this is difficult. It is hard being in distance learning when you've got family responsibilities and when you've got students who are different levels and you're trying to make it work in your household and childcare, all of those issues. And I know this is difficult, and we continue to appreciate your partnership. Our families have stepped up over and over again during this time. And to our staff as well, you also are navigating those things I just mentioned, while at the same time providing instruction to our students. So a big thank you to our staff and our families who are just stepping up and making the best of this not ideal situation. So I appreciate you coming to the listening session today for an opportunity to weigh in and ask questions. And with that, I will turn it to Beth to wrap us up.
Thank you, Mike, board members, and all of our other esteemed guests. I really appreciate this. It was a great discussion, and I just want to remind everybody watching that you can access the recordings of both this coffee chat and the one that took place on Wednesday on the superintendent page of our website. In addition, we have created an FAQ out of a number of these questions that will be shared along with our hot news publication on Monday. So please keep an eye out for those. And if you have additional questions that you weren't able to get addressed today, please feel free to email me at grazerbe@hsd.k12.or.us, and I will route those to the correct person and get an answer for you. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.